Seth David here from the world famous Nerd Enterprises Incorporated, bringing to you another special guide to the Galaxy. This time we're talking about 8 Slack alternatives, which one I chose and why. Now, I want to start from the beginning here, which goes back to when the announcement came, I think a few years ago now, that Salesforce was going to be purchasing Slack. And I immediately got worried. And back then, I immediately started researching Slack alternatives. And for a while, I settled in on Discord. And then eventually I went back to Slack because there were too many things that I missed about Slack. But probably the thing that stands out the most was the ability to set reminders on messages. You could mark things as unread, but that still becomes distracting. What I really loved about Slack, that it was the one thing I probably missed the most. To a lot of you, it might sound silly. To many of you, it won't. But the ability to tell it to remind me about a message in 3 hours or the next day, or I can pick any custom time I wanted to be reminded. That, among other things, led me back to Slack. And especially at the time, Salesforce had rolled out a bunch of updates in Slack that made it, a little more visually appealing. And at that point, I got encouraged, and I was looking forward to seeing, more frequent improvements. And frankly, haven't seen many since that. They rolled out a bunch of improvements then, and then the product has changed very little since. Earlier this year, as of this recording, end of 2024, they rolled out their AI product, which again was exciting, and then it was like I got the wind knocked out of me, and I'll explain more about that later. So the bottom line was I was concerned about Salesforce's takeover of Slack because Salesforce is a company who tends to serve large companies, and I had a feeling they would crush the small business users of Slack, and sure enough, they did in a big way, because shortly after they took over, they changed the free plans. The limits were changed from being limited to 10,000 messages, other than that, anything goes, to 90 days. They changed it to a time frame, which for a lot of small businesses, 10,000 messages was more than enough. They weren't going to hit that limit anytime soon, but as soon as you change it to 90 days, it doesn't matter what kind of volume of activity you have going on in there, you're going to hit that time frame, and then you're going to lose access to anything older than 90 days. For a small business who's relying on that, it just crushed them, especially because some of these businesses couldn't afford the fee for the number of active users they would have. So a lot of small businesses found themselves needing to find other solutions, and I'm sure they did. So most recently, I had a situation where I made the determination that I could afford the fees for Slack, especially for some of my, more active workspaces, and in particular, frankly, for 97 and up, where I have monthly recurring revenues from all the members, which is more than enough to support, paying for Slack for all the active users. I also have for years included a Slack workspace dedicated to each course I have, so that members who sign up for a course can have a focused workspace where they can ask questions specifically about that course. So you go through a lesson, you have questions, you have a more specific situation than I could have possibly covered in a generic course that's meant to appeal to anyone. And so you can ask your questions in Slack and I can answer them. Now, those are not recurring revenues. I charge one time for the course. And for one of my courses where got a lot of signups in the beginning, and then it kind of slowed down, and I had my group that I'm working with. This was my Bulletproof Notion operating system course, where I got a renewal this year, just a few months ago, where I signed up for an annual plan to save a little bit of money, and I got hit with a renewal of like $3,000. And I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have that many active members. And so I took a look, reached out to support, and asked them about it, and they sent me the link into the help files, and I understand how their billing plan works, but what I wasn't aware of that I now know is that there's a link where you can go to see who's being considered active as a user. And when I looked at that list, there were people on that list who hadn't posted a single message or anything, for that matter, probably ever. And they were listed as active, and the support rep explained to me that all it takes for a user to go active is that they log in and click into a channel, let's say because they want to read something. Boom, all of a sudden they're considered active. So that's why I got hit with this huge bill. Now, to add to this, the response I got when I made a comment saying, this is, what do you call it? I'm going to have to look for alternatives. It's too much money. And his response was kind of a way of saying I don't care without saying I don't care. He kind of just sent me the link to where I can go to downgrade my plan and said something like, sorry, you can't afford this, which was condescending at best. And, I wanted to respond. I didn't bother, but honestly, I wanted to write back and say this has nothing to do with affordability and everything to do with value, right? And the value is just not there. As good as Slack is for a lot of people, for me, the value is not there, not at $3,000 a year, no matter how many active users I have for a single workspace. So, and imagine if every one of my users became active, I figured out it probably would have cost me like 10 grand a year. Definitely not worth that much, not to me. So I set out to look for Slack alternatives. Now, let's go through the list quickly. And I want to tell you, at first, I had like 24 apps on the list, and I quickly just going through each one and kind of looking at screenshots to get a sense of the user interface. Based on that alone, I quickly chiseled it down to 8. And then I've written detailed notes in the write-up that you can go through and review, explaining exactly why I eliminated a lot of these. For now, I'll give you kind of the Cliff's Notes version, because then I want to show you the app I've chosen and give you a quick walkthrough. And I think even just giving you that walkthrough will help you see exactly why I've chosen that particular app. And then we'll talk about the business model that I want you to learn that you can employ here for your own business, in terms of creating your own support communities and having the assurance of knowing what it's going to cost you, as opposed to Slack, which on some levels I feel like it's almost like based on, limited to the number of users times their $8 a month that they charge you. It's up to that point. It's almost like writing them a blank check and saying, well, potentially I'm going to pay this much. So if you do the math based on that, assuming everybody's active, you might be overwhelmed with what you're looking at potentially. And to me, that's almost as good as a liability you need to record on your balance sheet, because you might just be asked to pay that much one month if everybody happens to get excited about something, logs in and clicks into a channel. So here's the list in no particular order. I'm looking, it might even be alphabetical. I think it is. And then I'll break down what I landed on and why. So the first one that I looked at was something called Flock. The next one is called Highside. Another one was called Mattermost. Then Pumble. Then Rocket.chat, River, Wire, and Zoho Click. Now, most of these I eliminated because it became apparent very quickly that there was no app that you could just go in and install and start playing with it. In fact, you had to contact customer support to even get pricing, let alone to get a look at the app. The other thing in those cases is that they all seem to have a structure where you have to set it up on a server, either self-hosted or cloud-hosted. But already, to me, this is way too complex for the needs that I'm looking at, for the use cases and the people who, as far as I know, are going to want to use this. So I was out. Most of these I was just out based on that alone. And then one of them I reached out to, and it took somebody literally like 3 weeks or more to get back to me. And this is on the sales cycle, so I can only imagine how bad it is, when I actually have the product and need help. If they're taking 3 weeks to get back to me when I'm interested in, signing up, usually that's the fastest cycle that you'll get a response right away, is from the sales team. So I'd be concerned right off the bat about what kind of support you get with a product where they take 3 weeks to get back to you just on the inquiry. So what it boiled down to in the end were two of these. One was Flock, which I really loved, and the second was Pumble. So it came down to those two, and by that time I had invited a few people from my Bulletproof Notion Slack workspace, where I explained to them what was going on and what I was doing and why, and they were happy to come in and kind of help me test it, because I wanted to make sure that, from a user's perspective, they had the experience that I expected they were going to have. And so we all agreed we loved Flock. We even loved the name. We loved the idea that we could refer to members as flockers, right? And all kinds of things that go on from there. It was going to be fun. And then just as we were kind of settling in on that, I said, well, there's one more. Let's try this one other one, and it's called Pumble. And we ended up landing on Pumble. We loved Flock, but we just liked Pumble a little better. There were a few subtle little things. If I remember correctly, I want to say Flock had very limited emojis that you can use. Now, again, that might sound silly, but if you're using a workspace like this and you're living in it and working in it daily, those little details can really matter. So it boiled down to Flock and Pumble. We chose Pumble, not just because of that. That was just one thing that I remember that stood out. Ultimately, we chose Pumble because we loved the interface. And let's take a look. And I can share with you now, since that time, that I have also had occasion to work with their support. And their support is phenomenal. And one of the main criteria that always influences my decision to whether or not I want to use another app is the company behind the app. And Pumble is made by a company called Cake. Interestingly enough, their first product was something called Clockify, which I had played with a few years back when lots of people in the accounting community were starting to look for alternatives to T-Sheets because they felt the support around T-Sheets was not as good as it had been at one time, especially before they were acquired by Intuit. So they have a time tracking product that looks really cool. They also have a product called Plaky, which is a project management app, which if I wasn't so deeply involved with Notion, I would certainly take a look because from what I've seen so far of their other two apps now, I have a lot of confidence in this company and their design team and everything else about them. So you're looking at Pumble on my screen. One of the things that really stood out to me was threads. Now, yes, of course, Slack does threads too, but there's something about the contrast to me here that I like much better. I like the contrast here much better versus the way it's a lot of the subtle visual things definitely attracted my attention to Pumble. Especially where the threads were concerned. The other thing is notifications on threads. I can't explain exactly what it is, but all I can tell you is that from my end user experience now with both Slack and this application, Slack, when there's a notification because somebody responds in a thread, I find it very difficult to find, especially if that thread is buried far back. Here, I find it much easier to find it. In fact, I can click threads up here and it just does a beautiful job of showing me all the threads and in order of activity, whichever one has the most recent. And I think Slack does do something like this, but I also think once you've read a thread in Slack's comparable view, it goes away. I just generally find it much harder to find what I'm looking for in Slack. So that's a big consideration and a big reason why I came to love Pumble better than Slack. Speaking of threads, also up here, these are all things, by the way, that are available in Slack, but not by default. And when I'm creating a community and a lot of the users aren't as experienced as I am or even curious as in, let me go play around and see what see what I can do, it's going to be missed in a second, in a heartbeat, that you can actually add, like this one, for example, people in user groups, right? So here are all the people I have in my new Pumble community, right? It's just getting started. I really didn't plan to officially launch it until January 2025. We're in December 2024, and I'm starting to soft launch and invite some people in. So, and now all my courses, Slack communities have been downgraded to free plans. If anybody wants to continue using those, because I sort of promise lifetime support included, they can. But for anybody who wants a little better experience, better, my opinion, of course, then I am offering this community, which consolidates the support for every course. I've got all my major courses here in a section, so that anybody, whether you're in the course or not, can come in here and get support around the subject matter of that course. And this way, frankly, from my end of it, somebody might come in here and ask questions about property management and QuickBooks Online and eventually get interested enough to want to sign up for the course. So I've got it all consolidated this way. Everything's in one place. It keeps it simple for me and simple for the users, because people up until now who had 3 or 4 of my courses were going to have 3 or 4 different Slack workspaces potentially that they had to log into. And for me, that's no big deal. But for a lot of people I know, it can be overwhelming. So this makes it really, really simple. So I like the people and user group. Slack has this, but you have to know where to go to add it. With Pumble, this is here by default. Same with files, where I can access all the different files. You can see images that have been shared included, but you can filter this down to different file types. So if I know I'm looking for a PDF, I can choose that. I guess nobody's uploaded a PDF yet, but you get the idea. Let's reset. Okay, and I mean, to me, the people in user groups is the biggest one, because I'm frequently looking for somebody to send them a DM, and in Slack you have to use the global search unless you know that it even exists, that you can go into the settings and add this here, but it's not obvious and it's not clear. So again, a lot of this stuff is there in Slack, but I think Pumble's just done a much better job of making it available. Also in Slack, the comparable views here show up in a left-hand margin that takes up a lot of space. It quickly fills up, and so quickly you're gonna not have access to what all the things, and then you'll have to click more in order to see what else is there. So the navigation itself, even though they do have these things, and even if you know where to go and that it exists and how to add them, the navigation still gets very clunky in Slack. Here, it's simple, it's consolidated. And I mentioned the courses in a section. This is not going to be here by default. This is something each user can set up themselves. Slack has the exact same thing, where you can set up sections and then organize the channels that you have access to in these sections. So that's some of the main features that I like, and like I said, Slack offers them, but Pumble, in my opinion, has done a much better job of making them available because they've just made them there by default, right? And I have comments. There's a screenshot in the write-up that you'll see from my friend Rachel where she explains the same thing I was saying. So it's not just me. She says the color difference is nice, but also that you don't lose your notifications. She says, I find that if I'm in, exactly what I said, I find that if I'm in a thread in a given channel, I don't get the notification for new messages in that channel in Slack. It's made it harder to work with because I'm constantly going back to the main channel or another to ensure I don't miss something. So, and she confirmed I can quote her on this. The other thing to be aware of is you can go to all channels. Again, Slack has the same thing, but you have to dig to find this and make it available. And then over here, you can choose filter, exclude the channels that you're already in. In my case, I'm already in every channel, of course. And this makes it easier to determine what other channels that you aren't already in that you might want to be in. And the way I like to explain that is then it becomes almost like I like to think of it as like a subscription, where you subscribe to the channels that you are interested in at the time. And then if you move on, if you're no longer interested in the Airtable app, for example, then you can remove yourself from that channel and you don't lose anything. You can always come back anytime. Now, let's talk about pricing real quick and then the business model. So for Pumble's basic pricing, it's about half what Slack is. Now they don't have this, what Slack calls their fair billing practice, which I'd question the validity of that adjective fair. I'm not sure it's so fair. I think it's actually misleading, but that's my opinion, and I've already explained why. Because it's like writing a blank check up to the maximum number of active users. In other words, you really don't know what you're going to get charged from one month to the next, potentially. So their pricing is much more straightforward. In that regard, you just pay per user, and it's straightforward, and it's half the price of Slack. Now, you can upgrade to, like I went with their business plan, and then it's like $1 less than Slack. But the thing is, I have the predictability, and based on all of the foregoing, I decided to come up with a different business model where I said, instead of offering it for free for anybody who's in a course, I'm going to make this available to anybody who wants some support, and I'm going to charge what I feel is a very modest fee, especially considering the level of support people will get here and the additional resources I plan to provide. You can kind of see it from your screen. I'm not just going to ignore you all until you ask a question. I'm going to get in here pretty regularly and post thoughts, ideas, anything that I think might be of value to the community. So I'm going to make sure that it's worth a lot more than the $97 a month that I'm charging for this. And as you'll see, because I'm going to show you very transparently in a minute, and I'm showing you this because I want you to consider building something like this for your own business, for your own practice, building a support community. It's, as of this recording, I'm about to release an article that uses the same idea, based on the concept of if you want to build a subscription model for your business, if you want to morph your business into a subscription type business, which I strongly encourage you to do, and you're going to hear a lot more from me about this, about why I think it's the best thing you can do for your practice, for your business. So I want to show you how you can start, how you can build a very simple subscription model based exactly on what I'm doing here. Same thing, but you'll have a little different target audience than I've got. My target audience, my ideal clients, are of course other accountants and bookkeepers who want my support helping them grow, build, run their practice. For you, the accountant or bookkeeper who may be watching this, or even if you're some other kind of business owner, you can just take the concept and wrap it up into the context that fits your business model. Bottom line, your potential ideal customers all have one thing in common. They want your expertise. And so what you want to do is create a community like this, invite them in, let them pay a nominal monthly fee like $97 where they can get access to your expertise. 90% of them, maybe more, will never hire you beyond that. They'll just use that. That's fine. That's wonderful because you're getting paid for doing something now that you were probably already doing for free, which is answering people's technical questions and not asking them to pay you for it. And of course we do that, and we want to do that to show people that we're, that we're knowledgeable and so on, and we want that to be a program of attraction. But if you're doing it a lot, why not get paid for it and give people a resource that's even more reliable than them counting on you getting around to responding to an email nowadays? So let's take a look at the model real quick. And I've just sketched out a very simple spreadsheet that looks at this. So let's say you have 20 paying users, right? $97 a month each, of course, 12 months in a year. Annual revenues, 23.2, right? And this is based on something modest. Like, it should be, I think, pretty easy for anyone to, accumulate 20 users in a pretty short period of time. There's going to be one free seat that you're going to want to pay for. So this is the cost side now. One free seat you'll pay for yourself, and maybe more if you add staff. So I've created this variable where you can adjust that. You always want to have a buffer because the way Pumbl works, unlike Slack, and again, some of you would complain about this, but I'll explain why I like it. So with Slack, if I invite a new user in, Slack just doesn't even question it. They'll just bill me. They're happy to just bill me for the extra user. With Pumbl, you have to buy seats, and if you reach that limit of seats, Pumbl will send you and the person who tried to join a message letting you and them know that the limit of seats has been reached. I like this better. I think this speaks from a company that cares, because they want to make sure that you're not going to get a surprise bill because all these people have joined. So I built this in where you can, any given day, you can go look and see how many actual paying users you have and make sure that you have at least 5 extra seats or whatever. If you expect a lot of people to join all of a sudden, then obviously you just buy a whole bunch more seats. You can always adjust it back down. Right. And the other thing that's nice about this, especially if you pay for a year in advance, so if you set your plan up so that it's yearly, you buy a seat, somebody joins, if they cancel the next month, you now have an extra seat to use for the next person who joins. So you can kind of swap them out. Then this totals up all the seats you're paying for. The annual cost per seat, this is based on the business plan, which is annual at $6.99 per seat per month. Right, so that's where this comes from, and that gives us an annual billing, in this case based on 20 users and this number of free and so on, of negative $21.8088. So we take the gross revenue minus the fees, and that's our profit, which is not bad for something you're already doing for free, as well as something that's really easy to support and implement, as in just answering people's questions, paying them a little attention, maybe grabbing some screenshots to illustrate something in your answer, or even a short Loom video. So there's a small little tech stack that will help you provide this service that's really, really easy to manage and implement and doesn't cost much at all. So last thing to consider about this, and this is going back to what I originally brought up about Salesforce buying Slack and some of the implications and basically what I see as a potential problem if you're a small business continuing to use Slack, which is this. I mentioned earlier that they rolled out their AI product earlier this year. And I also mentioned that at first I got excited and then I got the wind knocked out of me, because when I had somebody come and demo the feature, I did get very excited. It looks really slick. It will make a lot of things a lot easier in Slack, especially if you have a big community. So my first thought was, yeah, I'll get it for 97 and up, because like I said earlier, I have a good monthly revenue base coming from that program of mine to support, something that costs like this. Problem is, when it came down to the billing, unlike their base plan for users and such, it is flat out just per month per user. And I have a lot of users in that Slack workspace. So it very quickly became apparent that for me to implement their AI product, it was going to be well over $10,000 a month. And I said, no way. Again, it's not even about affordability, but it's about value. And is it really worth more than 10K per month? It's a cool feature. It's a fun feature. It makes things easy. But do I need it? No. And here's where my final concern comes from here. If that's how they're pricing the AI product, my question is, how long will it be before they decide to go back and do the same with their base plans? It tells me this is how they're thinking. They could wake up tomorrow and make that decision that they're going to implement this change in the pricing plan. Who knows how much notice they're going to give you? Maybe they'll be nice and give you like 6 months. Maybe they'll give you a month. Maybe they'll give you no notice. Bottom line, and here's the bottom line question, do you trust them? I sure don't. So my recommendation to anybody who's watching this is start making plans, get out of Slack, move into a product like Pumble. I like the company behind it 1,000 times better. I like the product a whole lot better than Slack. And generally, I think this is going to be a much better move for small businesses because the company behind Pumble, which is called cake.com, I definitely believe and have the impression that they are much more committed to supporting small businesses than Salesforce will ever be.